Call to order our SEAC meeting for Thursday, October 2022. And we'll start with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Follow now with the Human Rights and Equity Statement. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning environments that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination while placing human rights and equity at the center. And now we'll just do our roll call. And what we'll do is we'll go around the table and each person will say their name and their association. Okay, starting with myself, I'm Eva Kyriakides, SEAC Chair and the representative for the Association for Bright Children.
I'm Donna Edwards, and I'm a trustee representative. I represent Town of Ajax, Ward 3.
My name is Elizabeth Daniel, representing the Ontario Association for Families and Children with Communication Disorders.
Anthony Phelan, secondary school representative.
I'm Hannah Kwan Nguyen. I'm representing Eastern Seals, Ontario, which is helping children with disabilities.
Hi, I'm Carissa Lewis, and I'm representing the Black Parent Support Group.
I'm Masati, Vice Principal at Southwood Park Public School in Ajax.
Connor Jameson, one of the system lead principals for Inclusive Student Services.
Andrea McCauley, Superintendent for Inclusive Student Services, and this is something important for recording secretary. And since Renab is in the meeting, our communications team will be led to create.
We'll just wait a moment for Sensa to join us, and she can Renab to join us, and she can introduce herself.
I'm here, everyone. Thank you for accommodating. Sorry for the mix-up.
Oh, no, I apologize for that mix-up. You want to introduce yourself, Sensa?
I'm Sensa Renab, the SEAC representative for Autism Ontario.
Excellent. Okay, now that we have quorum, can we get a motion to approve the agenda? Donna, seconders? Elizabeth, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from our September 15th meeting? Is there any questions or concerns with respect to those minutes? Okay, can we get a motion then to approve the minutes? Carissa, seconders? Elizabeth, all in favor? All right, minutes are approved. Moving on then to staff report, starting with the administration report.
Great. So thank you and good evening. Well-being, mental health, and learning are all intertwined in planning for the success of our students. And yesterday we have two great examples of activities in the district that bring that interwovenness together. So we're going to share just a little bit about Student Senate and a little bit about our Grove Advisory team. So Student Senate brings students from across all of our secondary schools together. And one of their goals for this year is advocacy around children and youth mental health. Student Senate last year and culminated in the spring created a mental health resource document called 5 Ws. And their job was to put the resource together, and then Student Senate for this year is picking that up and will be the group communicating that out to youth across our secondary schools. And so the Student Senate conference yesterday was supported by our mental health leader, Stephanie Pellebor, who was helping them with the communication plan for the 5 Ws document. And part of their work this year during Children's Mental Health Week later in May will be to host a student symposium on mental health as well. So really great to see our youth leaders active in well-being and mental health. As well yesterday, so our Education Community Partnership Program, so ECPP, and in Durham Region, those are day treatment programs that bring agencies and the Durham Board together in service of students who are accessing day treatment programs. So the board provides a teacher and the agency, and we currently work with 16 agencies and have 50 program classrooms, comes together under the title of Grove School to give the kids an experience in a culture of school as they're accessing day treatment. And Grove School has an advisory committee that is formed of the executive directors and senior managers of the agencies. And that team comes together a few times a year to talk about service to kids. And so yesterday I had the pleasure of presenting on the Durham Board's human rights, anti-racism, anti-discrimination policy and how the related procedures, as well as our mental health and well-being action plan, all dovetail together. And we had really great conversation around the room and at tables around what are systemic barriers to children and youth mental health, what are barrier busters or things that could be remedies to those barriers. And then we ended the conversation around assets of children and youth mental health. So a really good conversation. And then within the Grove Advisory Committee as well, the administrators of the schools that host some of the programs in building joined the meeting to talk about integration opportunities and how kids move between day treatment and regular classroom and have those experiences. And that was also relationship building, which is really important after the last couple of years of being apart. So just putting people in a space for conversation. Our report back to SEAC from last meeting was around the ASL second language course for secondary students. And so we currently do not have any schools running that within the 22-23 school year, confirmed with our IT team on that. And then our final report item this evening is around individual education plans, because we are just beyond the 30th day of the regular calendar. That was Tuesday. And so schools, and Connor, I believe, can talk a little bit about the consultation process that we highlighted this year as being really important, should be connecting with students and families within that first 30 days. But that 30th day is a really important marker to kind of have the plan consolidated, and then it becomes, it remains a working document. But currently in board, we have 12,232 students who have programming based on individual education plans, formalized through IPRC or formal committee. And then we do have additional students who have what we refer to as non-identified individual education plans. So not a formal review of identification and placement, but requiring an individual education plan. And that generally, most of the kids that have that, it's because there's an occupational therapy referral for SEAC, the specialized equipment, and that requires that an IEP be in place to identify how the equipment's going to be used and survey the student's strengths and needs. So again, 12,232 formalized through IPRC, and it is just north of 250 in terms of non-identified, with the majority of those being OT recommendations. So I'm happy to take any questions on any of those items, but it does dovetail, I think, into the later information that Connor will highlight. But that is our administrative report for October 2020.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eva.
No, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Andrea with respect to the administration report?
So, Andrew, how do the numbers kind of compare perhaps over the last 3 years? Is this more like, has there been an increase in IEPs and so forth? And again, it might be that I've missed something from last year, but just to kind of catch me up.
Thank you. We are seeing a growth in the district, but proportional and maybe in the type of exceptionalities that our kids are coming in terms of strengths and needs. But we have hit an enrollment of 77,000 students in the district, which is quite a bit higher than we entered into the pandemic. So we do see significant transfer from the Toronto District School Board and Toronto Catholic of families riding that real estate wave, but remaining within the GTA for service access. And so although the increase in number of kids with IPRCs and IEPs is growing kind of parallel, what we hear from colleagues in other districts and in talking to school administrators is kids with complex needs. We are seeing a faster rate of growth in that area and the kids that we have the privilege of supporting than other districts because of partners like Grandview Treatment Center being locally. We have had a sharp increase in the number of specialized group homes opening in Durham or moving and relocating to Durham. And then because of the growth area, it's basically North Pickering, West Whitby, and North Oshawa. Because of the construction of new homes and the accessibility features, Hannah, I'm thinking of our Easter Seals families, where accessibility is much more efficient to build within a new build than a retrofit to a home. So we are seeing an increase of kids with developmental or physical disabilities moving in, particularly within those boundaries as well, as part of the construction. So we are seeing growth, but our growth is, as a board, we're one of the few with growth enrollment provincially. And then our students with special education needs have a slightly higher trajectory in terms of additional students within that group. And then we certainly see sitting beside that the number who have learning plans, because really the individual education plan focuses on the learning and then the learning skills. We are seeing a sharp increase in the referrals for services that sit alongside that, sometimes the same students and sometimes additional. So we are 15,000 and climbing in terms of kids on service referrals such as mental health services. So we are seeing our teams are busy with the privilege of serving kids.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? Right. I have one, if there's no other questions, that's it. We were talking student senate, going back to the student senate. I love the work that they've been doing, and I know before the pandemic, a number of years ago, now it's hard to believe, but it's probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, we had a couple of students trustee come and speak to SEAC and present sort of what they were working on at the time. And at the time, I believe it was advocacy around the online learning. Is there a possibility of us inviting them back to share with us what they're doing now and their focus now?
Absolutely. So we have some of Anthony's and our secondary colleagues, our advisors to Student Senate, as well as Superintendent Davis is the primary contact.
Okay.
So you can reach out and maybe we plan for them in the winter so that they're in their action plan. But towards implementation. If that's okay.
that'd be fantastic.
We can follow up with them for sure.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, because what they're doing, I think, often dovetails with stuff that we do, and if we can support them in any way, even just, with moral support, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you for extending that input.
Okay, all right, if there's no more questions on the administration report, we're gonna move on to the board report.
All right, things have been kind of busy as we wrap up our term for that. There was the decision that we have 3 vacancies, of course, on the board at this point in time, but being close to the election, it was decided that we would not fill those positions, that the election will then fill all the positions again. There was a motion that was brought forward around the staff to provide a report on to address trends on violent instances and outline the strategies adopted to address incidences and whether they're effective, but also looking at we also looked at ensuring that sharing the information with parents as well as around the type of incidents dealing with not only with the student the other students in the classroom as far as the mental health and well-being of those students as well. And whether we were using a trauma-informed approach, which I know we are, but an approach to incidents that are happening and the impact of it on students and staff. So that was quite a long motion. but it basically passed as well. As well as the students, trustees brought forward a motion that was considered the board. They're not allowed to actually bring motions forward under the Education Act, but what they wanted to do is that they wanted the board to send a letter to the Ministry of Education and the local MPPs, so that requesting that the Education Act be amended so that it gives that the student trustee the right to independently at least move or second the motion. So we agreed as a board that we would do that as well. Let's see, I'm just trying to think. We also had several other notices of motions that came forward. Just going back. That will be considered later on, including basically the changes to the Pickens School Community Council. They've been amalgamated into one because that's basically what the regulation is. It considers both the school community council and the one regulation. So it's combining those two. And also around the superintendent, supervisory officer recruitment policy also was a notice of motion. The parent committee, involvement committee also presented their report. And there was a long discussion because of the Ministry of Education has put out their memorandum on consultation on education, which came out kind of early for some reason this time. Usually it's later, but and priorities are really focusing a lot on capital funding of what can be done to improve capital funding is one of the priorities under there. So I did send that out. I think I sent it to you, the link as far as that's concerned about if we did want to add, but the deadline is November 15th as far as some of the things, but at least I know a lot of the organizations that they would have also received sort of information as well. Sent that link out. The deadline is quick.
Is that link also sent to Lisa? Yeah, if we could forward the link to all the SEAC members, and then they can take a look and see whether or not we need to send that to their associations.
Yeah, but it again, it's their sort of their consultation process on the document around the funding, and we'll see. But it was sent early with the hearing done the November 15th. That's kind of bizarre. November 14th is the last day of trustees' terms, just so you know.
On the note of the GSN, so GSN is grants for student needs and how we receive our funding. On the consultation, as a district staff team, we will be submitting for consideration of the special incidents portion for reconsideration. And so special incidents portion is just for online and tables. How it's a claim-based process by which we can apply for funding towards the cost of intensive support for students who require more than 2 board staff for their access to learning and well-being at school. And it is very intensive from a staffing perspective, and our perspective is that it removes service from kids for the purpose of writing the claims. But within the DDSB budget, for example, for the 22-23 school year, it is just over, it's about $3.1 million in $28,000 increments that we're going to claim back through that claim process. So it's for supports already in place. But we will be submitting concerns with this process as a team and submitting that, so we'll be able to share that out with SEAC once we write it. As you said, it's hot off the press with a tight timeline, but just for transparency, we will be submitting on it.
Yes. And that's been our ongoing concern around the same process as far as the not manual, but the intensive labor that it takes in order to do that. And then from my perspective, when it comes to the amount of money that comes back, although it's every little bit counts, it's still a very small portion to what it takes to support students with intensive needs. And you're talking about more than 2 reasons why we constantly, as a board, in the budget process, allocate more to special education funding, and this year it was over $6 million that we had added onto it. And the ministry's point of view is that special education programming, and that because I've been around for a few years, at least as far as they're concerned, is that how we provide services to special education services individual by the board. And so they see they have within the funding element, you have a per pupil amount that is given, the sum of the per pupil amount that is given for each student around special education, and that gets put into pot, but they basically say if you, and then there's the SIP, but if you decide to put more money into it, that's how you, and what you decide to deliver, it costs more, then that's up to the board. So it gets very, very frustrating when the amount of money that they provide, especially for our students under SIP plans, is nowhere cover the cost of what it does to provide and support our students.
Any questions for Donna regarding that? I'm gonna throw it out there, if you guys think. And I realize it actually, I was supposed to update the SIP letter from we had like prior to like the end of right before the election, to send it out. I suggest maybe we submit it through here as well, through that link, as well as sending the letter to the Ministry of the Shadow Ministers. If we're looking at funding formulas, and it's probably the best time to get it in, and also to make sure that the shadow ministers are aware of what we're asking for and why we're asking for it. If everybody's in agreement with that.
So the letter was saying that SIP is inadequate funding.
So we did a letter right before the election, hoping to make an election issue, where we said, basically, we dusted off the letter we had written previous to the current government being in place, and advocating for an increase to the SIP funding, explaining the shortfall, the true cost compared to the shortfall, and asking for an increase. That money was to increase from 27,000, I think, to 36 or 38,000. Or it was about $11,000 increase. It was supposed to happen when the current government came into power. They rolled it back to 500 and change of an increase. So essentially, they rolled it back. They took that what was going to be an increase. It was still a shortfall, but it was significantly less of a shortfall than it had been. So we last term, in the last school year, we had updated that letter just prior to the election, but I think people were already pretty much off campaigning and weren't sort of focused as much on that. So we copied the shadow ministers the last time. And so I'm thinking if they're doing a specific consultation on education funding, we should submit it through that, and then maybe also send the letter separately to the minister and to the associate minister, who is now Patrice Barnes. Anyway, the deputy minister, I guess, right? Yeah. So I'm suggesting we copy that as well as the shadow ministers. I'm like, we could just like blast it out there in as many directions as we could possibly blast it to say,
I just want to add that November 28th, the Ontario Public School Board Association is having an advocacy day at Queen's Park, where we will be able to, well, I shouldn't say we, because I don't know if it will be we, trustees will be able to meet with local MPPs at Queen's Park and raise concerns and awareness of their board's concerns. And we've done it quite before. It's an education piece, because we also do, at that time, there the release of, we do a survey as well, and that the information from that survey around the needs and the supports and on the wants of the boards will be accumulated, and parents will be accumulated and presented to the MPPs as well. So it's a great opportunity to have that letter available for the trustees that may be going down to having a CAA as well.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion then for us to submit that letter through the consultation process as well as to the Ministry of Child Ministers? Carissa? Seconders? All in favor? Okay, motion passed. Making a to-do list right here. Okay, if there's no more questions for Donna on the board report, then we can move on to the Inclusive Student Services Department report.
So nice to be in person, nice to actually see you not on our person. To be able to actually meet with you. So the department's being busy. I will definitely say that. We've definitely had a quick start to everything. But one of the foundations that we wanted to put out, as Andrea had mentioned in her report as well, is around some of our focus on IEPs this year, and specifically around consultation and the fact that we need to think about we know that we're mandated to be able to deliver an IEP within the first 30 days. But consultation can be an ongoing process, and that we want consultation to be real, we want it to be authentic, we want it to be something that is focused on the gifts, the talents, and the abilities of our students, and starting from that point. We want it to be something that focuses on their unique strengths, and also incorporating the fact that we need to move as a system, and we have made systemic promises and commitments to our community around honoring Indigenous education, as well as honoring Indigenous rights, as well as honoring human rights and student rights, as well as looking at our staff and well-being policies as well. So these are big foci that have been across the system. And when we look at student rights and human rights and Indigenous rights, we want to start with language, and we want to start with commitments around getting the concept of consultation and collaboration. Families are our partners with our students. All of our communities and all of the people who work around our students are our partners and need to be working in consultation with that. So there is a very distinct focus this year at working with our principals, our vice principals, and then through into staff teams with a focus on the 30 days and really looking at making that consultation process as authentic and as real as possible. And then also taking a reflective lens on, so as a school, what are we doing really well? And then what are things that we can do even better through this process? And then as we're looking at developing IEPs, we want to make sure that the information has currency. We want to make sure that that information is the most current, most relevant, and recent around the student as well. And that then flows into how any of those modifications around curriculum actually sit on the IEP. And I just want to notice there, so I mean, I don't like to talk to slide, but I just want to say within a continuum of accommodation modifications at grade level and modifications from grade level. So then it's asking those types of questions around what is the most appropriate modification for our students and what's really going to match their gifts, talents, and abilities and how they are right. So that's been a distinct focus across the system, and then we are going to continue, and not just from the school side, but also as a district. We're continuing that process to look at how we can make that consultation process and that collaboration process as real and as authentic as possible for all of our families and for all of our students. We are pleased to announce that we have 2 schools who have a unique role within their schools and our developmental support worker role. They are located right now at Westley Heights Public School and Pine Ridge Secondary School, where we have high concentrations of our developmental classes. And one of the big features of the developmental support worker role is the fact that they have a distinct focus on the medical care in accordance with Ministry of Health and in accordance with our DDSB policies, as well as the policy procedures that direct registered health plans as well as direct our processes within there. But one of the biggest things that they have as a developmental support partner, good and extensive education around how we are providing those unique medical care points for our students. So they have lots of great things that they're looking at, again, with a higher concentration of our developmental classes at these two sites. They were the sites that were chosen at this time. We also are very happy to be able to announce the formalization of the role of our child and youth support workers. So you'll be hearing about our child and youth support workers throughout the past couple of weeks in my time here at SEAC, which is very since last January, but I know we've definitely talked about before. We've had a conversation where they have focused distinctly on tier 1 mental health and well-being across the system. And now within that role, one of the big things that they can do is that they're supporting the skill building at that tier 1 level. So those are all of those great base strategies that we know form the basis of great schools as well, and just support as many students as possible. But they also work now directly with our social work and as well as our psychological services staff to bridge some of the content supports that are in place as well. We are happy to be able to say that we have at our FERP group, so as you notice on the poster that is there, that we have the registration went out and it filled in terms of registration very quickly. They are 8-week blocks, and we have teams that are up and running, and we have 8 sessions, and I said they have filled very, very quickly. And students are being supported and feeling that the sessions are definitely focusing on the unique needs that are part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, and being able to look at how some of those specific and trying to form those unique supports for our students as well, and trying to find community and making sure that there is lots of community for our students as well. So we do know that it's an 8-week sessions, and we anticipate that as they continue, that we will be definitely able to hopefully see some of the points that there, but we definitely saw the 8-week sessions go there. So it meets the needs there. Our administrators, so our principals and vice principals, went through over July and in September, where all of our Ps and VPs have been able to do a little bit of catch up around some of their behavior management systems training. And this is important when we look at it from a lens of being a leader within a school, because sometimes BMS is equated into, and I can say this as a certified BMS trainer myself, sometimes it's equated into the physical portion. That's really about 15% of the training. The 85% where we're looking at that ecological system, so we are looking about how we can look through what a student is trying to communicate to us when we see any form of behavior, whether that is, again, a student who is happy, regulated, be able to communicate that to times when we may not be seeing that moment. It's all communication, and it's all things that we do, and that's where it's important for our administrators, for our principals and vice principals to be able to have that training, because then they are leading their buildings with that lens as well. And there was also a great presentation. We'll just touch on this very quickly, just around how special education funding actually does sit within the district and across the province as well. And that was something that I know Andrea did have the pleasure of presenting at and be able to kind of walk our Ps and VPs through. So there was a lot of, I was going to touch a little bit more on special incidents portion funding, but I know we have definitely kind of explored that in that sense. So this is just a summary of that. I'm just going to quickly kind of move through, but as you know, it's the one thing I'll highlight there. That wasn't part of the previous conversations, that there's kind of 3 areas where we can make a claim to be able to recoup some of those costs, where we are looking ahead and trying to do that, because we do account for students who do require those additional supports, and we do look at how we do that, and that's all part of the next one's around the allocation as well. So 3 types of SIP claims: health claim, safety claims, and sometimes a health and safety claim for some of our students. So those are formula that, again, are teams. We just completed 2 sessions led by our manager and clinical lead from psychological services, Dr. Sarah Schlein, and supported by myself and my other partner, Michelle Rafferty, where we actually brought our psychological services staff, our instructional facilitators, our current resource vision and our vision resource teachers together to be able to look at what that training is going to be, so how we can really support our schools in working through this process, because it is a complex process to be able to work through, and it does take a tremendous amount of staff support to be able to work through that process as well. So again, that's the number that was reflected. So for looking at that, I'll just let you take a quick moment to read through the slides as they're there, but this already been discussed. And we are going to say that at this point, we are working through the process of replacing our current software that is housing all of our special education records. We want to be able to make sure that we have a platform that matches the reliability, that has stability, and then also has it's robust and integrated with all of our other systems. So the tool that we're moving from is it's called Power TPM, is where we are currently, and then moving into our more mainstream programming around what we call Power School. So this is where a lot of our information already sits in terms of, so that's principals and vice principals and teachers when they're taking attendance, it's through the Power School system. So what this does is it puts a focus, not necessarily on the form, but it puts a focus on the student. And it makes it sure that we're really tracking it through that. So even that simple change is something that's really important for us in terms of operational things. We're also very happy, and I don't know if Andrew had the physical copy, and I didn't say you had that, but it was the classroom support staff, our go-to guide for health and safety. We wanted to be able to reflect that we have different roles. And this used to be our EA guide, go-to guide for health and safety, but we realized we do have different roles within the system. And we wanted to make sure that we are reflecting those roles. And there was a distinct update this year as we are learning much more around mental health and well-being compared to when this was first launched, that there's a distinct focus on supports for staff, and especially around those mental health and well-being supports for our staff too. And we have gone through the process of being able to launch to our system as well, being able to understand the EA allocation process as the chair of that table. I would say it's a distinct and it's a heavy process to work through, because again, we are looking at how we can support all of our students wherever we can, but it's a big process to work through. And we wanted to make sure that we, as a system, we were being very transparent around how that looks and operationally how that can be. So it is something along those lines, and especially even things such as how we recognize and we value all of our educational assistants, and the fact that we know that they bring tremendous skill and tremendous abilities into the classrooms and into spaces. So even things such as how schools can really look at optimizing schedules, and finding the fact that they can really maximize, again, off of those skills and abilities. That's a really important part. This is part of that whole process that we wanted to be able to bring out to our operations next. And we are also, so last year there were lots of updates from our fantastic transition to work coordinators and our team, Braden and Sade. So we're back in that sense. So we have our life beyond high school support. So there's going to be a presentation on November 14th, just to be able to have families understand what is it that is after school. When we move beyond that, what are those options? What are those access points? How are we going to be able to do that? And again, who can help support some of those transitions, and what are some of those options out there? So they're a fantastic team. They do amazing work. And this will be a great for any families who are starting to look along those lines. This is a really great time to be able to do, and I really encourage everybody to attend. And November 16th, Classroom Support Staff Appreciation Day. So if you have the chance to be able to send some well wishes to all of our amazing team who support our students. So those are our developmental support programs. We also have liaison interpreters, nutrition supports, and also educational assistants as well. So we have lots of roles that support our students in the classroom. And we'll make sure that we are recognizing them within those days. So if you have the chance, just remember on November 16th, send a nice tweet out. They will always appreciate that. And that's it for our department report.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the department report?
You mentioned about medical support and working with regulated health professionals. paraprofessionals, and we're hearing a lot in the news about staffing shortages and various challenges with that. So I'm wondering how that's affecting the program in the classrooms.
So when we're talking about regulated health professionals, one of the big shortages that we are noticing, and I know it's something that we are working on as a district and trying to work with our community partners, is around nursing. And we do have distinct shortages around nursing and nursing supports for our students. That is one of the biggest points that we can definitely say.
So you are noticing it.
Absolutely. Yes, we are absolutely noticing it.
Go ahead,
I
Chris.
do have a question, not part of my ignorance, developmental classes.
Developmental, yeah, so when we have a few different
Or,
classrooms, yeah, so we have different classroom types in special education classrooms. So one classroom that we offer is a developmental program. We also offer a PLP class, which is our practical learning program, our school support program, which is an SSP, and structured learning class, an SLC. So our developmental program is 6 students and a base of 2 aides and 1 classroom teacher. The majority of the students will present with complex medical as well as developmental needs within the classroom. So being a former teacher of a developmental classroom, I can say that a lot of the students we are working on functional communication around even using devices and switches to be able to communicate. We were working on making sure our meeting sensory needs, as well as providing those motor, as well as some of those physiotherapy goals, some of those OT goals for a lot of our students. But they are amazing students, and I said the 2 sites that we had talked about have multiple classes on each of those sites as well. So helps for us.
Oh, there is, okay, because that was gonna be my follow-up question is, exactly, and with this school that my son's at, like, there isn't a developmental class there, so just, if it's isolated to, number of schools or.
So just like all of a lot of our classes, developmental classes, again, because of the complexity of needs, a lot of times our students are coming. Some of our students are living in group homes. Some of our students are still living at home or living at home and being able to as well. So oftentimes we do have sites where we cluster some of the classes, but we do have them throughout the district as well. But it's not as widely spread as something like our school support program where we have more.
Yeah, so if you, sorry, so keep going. My apologies.
It's okay.
So what you'll see come forward to SEAC in the next few months as well is, so in Durham, we're committed to many paths to success. So students, the majority of our kids with special education strengths and needs are in regular class placements. And I don't mean to use the word regular, except for the fact that that's the language of the placement that the ministry gives us. And then we have students that are kind of on that continuum of wraparound. And a few years ago, we did a review of those specialized placements because the focus had been on diagnosis and criteria on coming into the class. And so what we did was a full rewrite to flip it to the outcomes that the student would achieve or be supported with as a result of accessing the program. So really flipping it on the commitment of the district of why would a parent or caregiver explore or commit to that being part of their child's pathway. And so the developmental programs are really that literacy, numeracy, self-care wraparound. But the key kind of difference usually, and not always, but usually for kids who are accessing through developmental versus practical learning is the level of independence and growth. Usually the kids in developmental, that will always come with adult support and structure, whereas the kids in the practical learning program have varying degrees of independence. And that way the school support program is more of an academic. And so we'll go through the different class types, but all the class types are represented. We have multiple municipalities, but it's kind of the 4 municipalities across the 401. So Pickering, Ajax would be Oshawa. And then when we're south of Highway 7, we kind of say our north area. And then when we're north of Highway 7, then we start dividing into Scugog, Oxbridge, and Brock. And so we kind of look at the north area of the board. And so as Connor said, all of the classes have kind of that representation across, but it's really, we engage in an annual process to say, who are the students we serve and what are their programming needs based on the model, and then we make adjustments. And then it's always a quandary too, and our facilities team is really exceptional. Again, you go back in special education history, and a lot of the special education programs were located in declining enrollment schools or where there was space. And our facilities team and our senior team and our trustees are really great about saying, let's locate the programs where the kids need them to be, because we shouldn't be moving kids out of their homeschool areas based on their needs. So we tend to look at that from a geographic and spread them out. We also had heard as well that sometimes, say through elementary, there's kind of 3 grade clusters. And what the board has changed is that sometimes the young class would be in one school, the middle grade class would be in another, and then the intermediate class would be, and then we were asking kids with more accommodation needs, we know that relationships matter for kids and families, to move schools, lose that connect. And so for most of the programs, like developmental or like practical learning, you'll see them be placed in one building so that the kids, that becomes their school, and they can come through it. And then we also heard from staff that collaboration of a community of educators, both classroom support staff and teachers, where we have, say, at Pine Ridge or Westmead or Village Union has 3 developmental programs as well, then there can really be a community of support for the kids and that professional support for the staff. So we try our best to do a geographical spread, not move the kids too much, because again, border like busing. And some other kids, that's too long of a day. And so we look at that. We tend to open and locate classes where we see them being needed for 3 to 5 years projection for us to open or move a class, because we don't want to be opening and closing shorter than that. And so that's where we draw on, and we'll talk about it at the table too, around our accommodations, our planning department projections for schools. But our team will move portables and do renos to get the kids as close to home. We don't guarantee all kids, because we can't put all programs in all schools, but we do try and keep kids within their family of schools, which is their secondary school and the elementary that would naturally flow into it. As much as possible, we try and keep them within that family and not be moving them too far, so that they're still with their siblings and their peers that they would play with on the street. So we try. But you are correct. Currently, I think we have 18 developmental programs, whereas within school support, we're north of 60 and varying. But that reminds me, we should bring next month just our class count and where they are for the table. But we'll also send out a link to the class descriptions. That's a really good reminder, Chris, so that as new members join SEAC for kind of those foundations and opportunities. So we really appreciate your question.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was going to say, as I recall, there were brochures that were made up of.
Yeah, they waterfall online, but also.
But yes, if you could send a link to all those brochures that have the descriptions of each program and what they involve.
So just online on DDSB, Inclusive Student Services, we have each of them, and then they just open up a tab with a bit more description. But we'll send that, censor it online. We'll send the link out to SEAC members, and then open up an opportunity if there's any questions about any of the class types as well.
Yes, and believe me, we were all, sort of new to SEAC at one point, and there's a lot of acronyms and there's a lot of things. I spent a lot of time writing down acronyms and trying to figure out what they meant later. So please ask the questions.
It's really
and ask us to.
out.
Yeah, if somebody's saying using an acronym, you don't know what it is or what it means, please ask, because it's really important, not even also for everybody at the table, but for also people who are watching us online. We tend to slip into that, and it's something we've been trying to get away from, right? Because there's a lot of speak that people don't necessarily understand. So, does anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Hannah, go ahead.
Of course. So Connor, you can go to anyone here. I think I was trying to track some of the slides that you had, and have a few follow-up questions to each of those. So the one around the IEPs and the consultation, I mean, I think fabulous, absolutely. I think all families who are involved in the IPRC and the IEP and even the non-identified students, I think really appreciate that consultation piece there. So just kind of wanting to say, you know, that's great, and then trying to how to do that well and doing it meaningfully. I think, and it's challenging too when school starts in September. You've got 30 days, right? So I just wanted to kind of highlight the importance of that, and then really what does that look like for families, and kind of continuing, I would say first, you know, seeking family consultation around it. There's so many breadth of needs and things like that. So I know that it can be hard to capture all the needs of families. And so just wondering a little bit in terms of, is there an evaluation process or a review process, perhaps even a satisfaction with how much, you know, and I know that's where some of our surveys are coming, but what are some thoughts already of what the, you know, individual classes are doing, or the individual teachers are trying to be meaningfully engaging families with this?
Yeah, so I think part of the, again, with that consultation, it's a matter of making sure that we don't want to just send home the form and say, here's a consultation form, because we realize for some families, that's fantastic. That is consultation, and that is engagement and collaboration for them. But we realize that, and I think you highlighted it really well, that's not consultation and collaboration for all of our families as well. So part of what we had asked principals and vice principals to do, and take back to their school teams, is to make sure that they are reach out in multiple ways, that they are looking for ways to be able to find out what is that preferred means of being able to, again, engage in that consultation process for the family. Because again, if consultation is worthwhile, meaningful, if it's worthwhile, meaningful on both sides as well. We want that to be one of those factors that
And I think perhaps one of the feedbacks would be that if it's possible to, in the communications with the principals or all the involved individuals, that there is some sort of note there that says, you know, would you like to have a meeting consultation of this? Is this, you know, written documentation sufficient? And yes, you can put your comments on it and send it back, but would you like a meeting? Would you like a virtual meeting? Would you like an in-person meeting? I'm wondering, I think for a lot of families, that type of invitation to a consultation, an invitation to even know what the options are. It could be a phone call, it could be, you know, what are some of the timeframes? Definitely there's the teacher conferences that are coming up, and that might be another place perhaps. So I think for a lot of families who may, one, be new to the IEP process, two, just feeling like maybe they're stuck, maybe they're feeling like within the process, they've tried certain things and they don't really know what's not working, and not necessarily that it's anybody's fault, but just something's not quite working. Well, that's just one feedback, you know, among families, is to say, you know, can there be that invitation somewhere in the document, even if it's just sent? So that's my thought.
If that comes up, as we are looking at our changeover in terms of process or in our software as well, I'm wondering if that's something that, as we look at all the forms and we start reviewing that, if that's something that we'll take back and that we can actually start to look at potentially even building into some of the forms. So it may not be something we see directly this year, but something we can definitely start to consult, start to build towards some other factors. Like that's a really good point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually just reviewed my son's IP form. This is my second year going through the process, and there's that invitation on the form. Like, would you like to have a conversation with a sister or the home teacher about the IP? So it's quite an extensive process in terms of the consultation, but then you're also invited to have a follow-up meeting, at least on the form, on my form.
Yeah, and maybe there as well, but yeah, and that's a great point, so Chris, because I think I've seen it over years, and maybe I'm kind of missing that. But I wonder if you can then, you know, if it's already there, that's great, and good reminder that it is there for families. But I think wanting something a little bit more like an introduction letter or something that says, you know, if this is the only thing that's being sent to families. You know, to say, hey, at the back of this, by the way, because you might get to this really large document and then get to the back page and go, I'm really tired of reading this, and what does it actually say? So I think just in recognizing that families are really busy, but great to know too that after having it many years, I've kind of forgotten that it's there. Yeah.
No, but it's good feedback. Thank you.
And then I know in clarification of time, yeah.
Oh, I just, no, just one quick comment too around the 30th day. Because legislation is around the IEP being developed by the 30th day. And so I think quite often the practice in our schools is the school team develops the IEP by the 30th day, principal or vice principal puts a signature on it, and then it goes home. And I've always taken the approach that a signature to me is synonymous with the document being completed. So as a principal, my practice was to not sign them until they came back. But part of the drafting of why those slides were constructed that way and focused on consultation is consultation during the 30 days. And then continuing to your point, Hannah, that consultation on going through program, IEP is working document. But it's always that interest, it's not, the legislation requires it to be developed by 30th day. So if we're not talking to families until after the 30th day, can we really say that they were consulted in the development of the IEP? I think that sits in a juxtaposition. So our intention this fall was to start just posing that, because it will be a change in practice for the majority of our schools, considering 30 days home consultation, really to honor the legislation. It's consultation during the development. So that means those conversations, meetings, consults, what do you think about, what are you looking about, and really creating a working collaborative process during, rather than post, that it just sits, the authenticity is richer if it's within the development. So sorry, since Rana, I know you, Hannah, I think has a couple more, and then I don't want to lose track of Hannah, or Censor Renev's hand either.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe we can let Censor Renev jump in for one question and then come back and on to the next, up to you, but.
Sure, other than I just wanted to kind of tag on to what Connor was saying there in terms of the student database that's being developed. And wondering about, you know, with certain children's rehab centers and sick kids, for example, families actually can access to see some of the reports and some of the data that's there. We don't actually see all of it, but I think we see quite a lot of it. I'm wondering, is that a thought or an idea in terms of this, what did you call it? It was your, whatever. Yeah, that's right.
So, and again, I'm going to say that I believe this is where we will be able to go. And I hope you're going to say we will, because we're still in the process of developing it. We're still going to have to work through all the bugs afterwards. Where this year we're looking at doing our 23-24 IPRC forms and really trying to do that. But what we're hoping to be able to do is so something that would be that we typically send home, so like report cards, something like an IEP that families will be able to access in the same way that they can access the report cards right now through that miracle, but they'll be able to access the IEP in the exact same means as well.
Fabulous. I know I'm always trying to search for my documents, right? So just having it in one place is great, and being able to cross-reference it, and then, you know, not having to have paper documents, that's great. And then I can pass it back to Sensa, and you guys can.
Okay, we'll pass it back to you. Go ahead, Sensa.
Thank you. And Hannah, I appreciate all your questions as well. Some of this discussion about the IEP, I know where we want to be and what we have planned in our plans, but I'm still hearing feedback from families who their IEPs don't go as planned, right? One of the comments that I've heard back this year is that some families requesting the discussion with the staff. The schools are scheduling 15 minutes for the discussion, and families are finding that that's not enough time. So thank you for opening up that discussion, Hannah. I have a much simpler question. Let me just pull up my PDF about where I put it. We just talked about the invitation for Life Beyond High School supports. Is there a flyer for that? I have quite a few families who are looking for that information, and I just tried to copy it out of the PDF and put it in an email, and the whole formatting went crazy. So is there an easier way that I can send that along to families?
Thank you for highlighting that, and there absolutely will be. We're just at like 1 or 2 days away from finalizing it, and then we'll make sure full SEAC table has access. Very similar to previous, it'll be one page with the further information. And thank you in advance for sharing it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, back
Back
to
to
you.
you, Hannah.
Okay, so I think a second group of questions that I have, it's just around, connecting some of the dots around some of the things that you're sharing in the report, and as well as Andrea saying that we're really seeing an influx of families with complex needs in this school board. I think we're also seeing that, with Easter Seals families, there is a percentage of us where many of us do have complex kids and are in developmental programs. And so, having heard some family stories, through, up until they leave high school, one of the things is just, whether the school boards are really staying on top of all of the incredible rehabilitation and programming and things that are happening around the world globally. And, Toronto, and we've got some really great schools, we've got some really great rehabilitation programs like Holland Floorview, Grandview Kids, Sick Kids and all of that. And so what are we as a school board doing to kind of look at everything from our special education programming that we're doing within these specialized classes to staying kind of cutting edge, innovative, looking at what are the best evidence programs? I'm just kind of wondering, is there a committee that's kind of dedicated to that? Because I believe this is a job in of itself. It's not something that, a special education teacher can do on the side. And I'm not even sure how much Grandview Kids can do it with their school-based programming to really stay on the edge of both education and rehab and where those spaces line up, right? So that's kind of my really larger question to the school board, like, can there be a focus on it? And I think we can all agree that there's value to it, but how do you get the resources? How do you do this?
So I'd say, no, it's just one, but
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of, we have really great connections with our school-based rehabilitation services programs. I'll be honest, I sat with them in a coffee chat yesterday, just working through, and actually we asked one of the questions that you did ask of each other and saying, so how are we going to be able to make sure that we are really addressing some of the ongoing needs and supports for our students? So that we actually had that, we were starting to look at that as a conversation. To be cutting edge takes a lot, and we do have some amazing partners in the area. We've definitely started some conversations with all of learning and have looked at some of the programs, some of these networks that can sometimes be there. Again, knowing that Holland Bloomfield is a supportive as well as medical / it does so many different things with so many different ways, but also as a huge research base. It's good to be able to continue the conversations with them. So is there a formalized committee pulling things together? No, we don't have that, but it's something we can definitely take back and we can start to consider on how we can start to answer some of the questions around how do we look at making sure that we are trying to do it, because especially knowing that our biggest partner in the area at Grandview is building an amazing, what's going to be a cutting edge facility within our region. So how is it that as a district and the largest school board within the district, the region, that we're going to be able to work side by side with them and being able to, again, as they stay kind of around some of those things. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, just that I think your point's really well taken about how do you do that, not just at a grassroots level or within individual partnerships, but consolidate it. So that's definitely something we'll take back and think about, because I think that's such a strong point. And then the only other than the relationship with the CTCs, children's treatment centers, is we do engage in partnerships that arise as well. So for instance, one of our speech language pathologists recently completed a 2-year secondment with Holland Bloomfield. So embedded within their children's treatment center day school program, and then bringing that knowledge back to the SLP team, as well as we currently for this school year, and we'll bring more information about it too. We have one of our speech language pathologists in a very focused role around the augmentative communication tools. And kind of, we felt that we needed to consolidate that for a couple of years in order to move the practices, and then we'll push it back out amongst the whole special our speech language team. But there was a need, so we need to kind of one person focus on it. As you said, it needs to have attention. So I really like your idea of who's the group that's bringing all this together. in the varied practices. So thank you for that.
Great. And then I think, the last comment that I just had, it was just around, just all the incredible things that are being done, and just wanted to acknowledge it, you know, everything from bringing different workers, like your developmental, service workers, to the child and youth support workers, and the, AACC, so I think it's fabulous, and really would, you know, inquire too about, you know, where families can, like, I mean, obviously we have this committee, which is fabulous, but would wonder, you know, if there were anything in particular that families were interested in, and wanting to kind of give feedback around, hey, we would really love to see more of this, and I know that almost every family that you can, you know, that you can poll will perhaps have a different answer.
Hi, Andrew. It looks like I lost everybody.
Hi, Sansa.
Table. Do you hear that?
Yes, but we can't. And I think she has.
Yes, I did hear. Thank you.
Good. What do you think?
Yeah, it does look sparse in the room today, so hopefully we have better turnout November.
Yes, it's a little sparse. So,
Okay, thank you.
perfect, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I think, somebody want to make a motion to use this? Next meeting, defer to the next meeting. Sorry there, I apologize, I had a motion and made it on. Can we just spend to, I'm not sure that I'll be here. Might be my alternate. Like break it into two parts, or like, we take section by section. Yeah, it's not huge, but, or just like in a small section. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, we can, yeah, well, I mean, that is our topic, so we can decide if we can carry it over, for sure. Like the
started a little bit.
Okay.
You want to give an overview of it or?
I can. Because for me, I think it really sits with the comments of SEAC. Because if we provide a framing to it, then we may be filling in information that SEAC identifies as maybe gaps in the plan. So I'm happy to get questions, or provide overview.
So,
Whatever you would.
yeah, no, that's fine. So the accessibility plan is essentially the board's sort of outline on reviewing accessibility across the system, right? So I don't know if anybody's had a chance to actually look at it. Did you look at the package? Did you have some, I was like, I know I made a couple of jot notes. Or more so comments that I didn't want to make that over. If you have stuff now, Hannah, please share.
Well, I was just waiting to see what the discussion was. I wasn't sure. I know in the past we've kind of broken up into the small groups.
Yeah,
We were talking about.
You were hoping you could get used to it, yeah. It's a little bit more difficult today just because we don't have as many people. I know from so when I was reading, and I'll just throw out maybe what my thoughts were starting off is, when we're looking at accessibility plan, we had talked about, we've written a letter to the ministry saying, instead of adding all these different, sort of diagnosis or whatever identifications to the legislation for accommodation, why don't we change the definition of a disability, right? And more focusing on environmental, right? More focusing on that WHO's perspective of, but for the environment, a lot of disabilities wouldn't exist, right? So, for example, so I'm sort of thinking of this, it's like any child, say, who had a physical disability, be it a wheelchair or walker, the cane, crutches, anything, whether it's long-term or even short-term, should always be able to know that when they go to their school and they walk into their building, that they're going to be able to go in any door in the building, right? They should be able to, especially you think in elementary school where they have this class lines up here and that class lines up there. Those kids, much like us, before and after a meeting, might have discussions amongst their groups, have chatting about life. So do the kids, right? So I would love to, I guess my utopia for the school would be that a child could walk into a school and be in that lineup with their peers and go in that door. And I mean, there's obviously, we can't put elevators in every area of the school, but for the most part, we could do our very level best to make their experience the same as theirs. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see, is I'd like to see the looking at sort of auditing the, especially the older buildings. So new builds are easy, but the accessibility built in, but like looking at our older buildings and things like an FM systems in classrooms. So now a lot of kids with needing FM systems have to carry it from class to class, right? They're portable, right? Right, but if we could start, it's a long-term thing. I realize it's not something the board would be able to just go, next year over the summer, we're retrofitting every classroom and adding this in. But as we went along, maybe we could be looking at, so many a year across the system until we eventually get there. So that one day, any of these things that are barriers to some of our kids now that sort of would make them stand out to their peers, because I know for a lot of our young people, that sort of standing out piece prevents them from wanting to use some of the stuff as well, right? Because they want to be like their peers. So if we start taking that and now it's become a universal thing, right? Those systems we know help everybody, right? That kid at the back of class is hearing things as clearly as the kid in front of class, sort of deal. Then that's when we truly have equality, right? Like these kids aren't having to ask for accommodations for something that should be. That's what I was thinking when I was sort of looking at this, at the accessibility plan overall, is looking at how do we move forward to the point where a lot of the things that sit even within an IEP start becoming something that's available to everybody, sort of that mindset of what's necessary for one is beneficial for all. And it's not me, sort of taking away that need for it to be requested, I guess. So my thoughts. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are on that, but. Anybody else want to? Anything in it?
Give a little background in terms of, because this accessibility plan for those that have read our previous looks very different than our previous plans. So the boards are required to have a multi-year accessibility plan. And you can see that this one is dated for our current year and projects the work across the next 4 years. And we took a different approach because our previous plans have all been written internally by SEAC and guided by SEAC in consultation, union partners around the table, even you sat at the accessibility committee as a representative of SEAC as well. This one, we did a little bit of a different thing. So Ability Center is certified in the LEAD program. So equitable and accessible design and delivery, I think delivery is the D. And so what LEAD does is it's a guided process to analyze systems. So the board would be a system in terms of, as you mentioned, the physical environment, but also in terms of services, resource management, engagement, strategy, leadership, and starts looking at, in order to be a truly accessible service institution, you've got to look at all the layers of the organization, the communication related to services. And so that gave us, and again, cross departments, some analysis of what's going well and what are some weak spots for us as a team that we can really develop. And that's where a lot of these action items came from, because it's that intersection between not only the kids that we serve and the kids being centered, but the staff that wraps around them as being accessible and community and schools as hubs. So that's where you see this be a bit different. In terms of accessible design, our trustees approve our new build plans and our facilities team. So as you're talking, I can picture some of the plans for a couple of them that are coming up. And so we've had conversations that we've never really had before. So our music rooms are going in with a sound wall buffer being built in so that there's not ambient noise going into the classroom next door. Because I think if we all go back to when we were kids, you could hear the band room and the music room. And so our new schools are being built with that sound. The music room is being built as the classroom at the end of the hallway, with the one wall being sound protective. We have intermediate classrooms because we know as kids get bigger, particularly in elementary, and then we want meaningful integration. There's actually a differentiation in the size of the classrooms, so that a school leader, Rima, I'll use you as our elementary rep, would be able to place classrooms that have integration built into them into a classroom footprint that's just a little bit bigger, recognizing that there's going to be additional bodies, including additional adult bodies coming into that space to give that equity of footprint in our classrooms. And even where we locate, our new schools open with 2 purpose-built special education classrooms so that we can do that. Gyms, I love the gym, has windows along the bottom of the floor. So that if kids are doing floor activities or gross motor, I'm thinking, Hannah, stretching for some of the kids served by Easter Seals. So if they're on the gym floor doing mat exercises, they can see the snowfall at the same time and do inquiry with their peers. And actually that's one of the schools that we moved to developmental program, because the windows start at knee. So a child who's accessing in a chair or a bed can still see outside, like their peers sitting in a chair. So lots of things around design. But it also speaks to, and I'll use the example of our communications team online, AODA compliance and communication. And we've got a lot of learning to do as an organization, a lot of good things, but a lot of learning. So this is where this situates. And then it also speaks to the integration of how the enactment of those policies, say human rights and equity, comes in with culturally responsive pedagogy and universal design to start building those what the students experience within the classroom, not just the walls of the classroom. And so that's where this looks, and I've done a you've seen many of the plans, it looks quite different, because it's been informed by participation in the LEAD program. And we can send a link out to that as well.
Go ahead.
I think, I mean, that's exactly some of the questions that I have, that I'm not sure to dig into, it would be great just to have a bit more background information, so like, what's different here? One of the questions I have too is just generally, how have you guys found, you mentioned some, things that are going well and some weak spots. What are some of those, just for our knowledge as we look at this plan? Because I think without being informed by the past and what are the things that were done, I think it's hard to give feedback into this.
Very good. And I think what we'll do is we ask our lead for the accessibility committee, Lisa Collins, she's situated in people and culture, but leads this to come as well, just to differentiate the staff that gets it. And who can speak to that process. I was in the consultations, but it'd be different to sit in that way.
And speaking of that committee, my understanding that
Carolyn,
I was gonna say Carolyn was on,
she was
in that spot. When are they meeting now?
They just had a meeting. I would have to check out their next one. Michelle, Connor's partner, Michelle, sits on that committee as well. We have a spot on that committee as well.
Because we maybe we'll be looking for one of
we will
SEAC
with
reps.
Yeah, with Carolyn's presentation.
Yeah, is it still during the day?
Yes, it is.
During the day. Yeah, put that in there. We can get the date, time, and then see if we have somebody who can see after that. I think it was really important. I know from my time sitting on that accessibility committee, I was with the AODA or like AODA, which is Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, first came in. And where we were looking at how board policy related to that and how things may have needed to be changed or revamped in order to reflect the requirements of AODA. So if getting a SEAC rep again back on that committee, I think is really important because that really helps when we're creating something like this, right? And then being able to bring the feedback with what the board's doing on accessibility on a consistent basis back to the SEAC table.
So I was just gonna comment, I really like the fact that we had, as far as some of the things you put in there is like for successes, but it was also as far as what I kind of think some of the things that you sort of find out the things that you are going to address with these action items. Because it's great to see the current successes, but it's also these are the areas that we want to address as well. So then you can relate that to the action items that you've got here as well. Because I kind of chuckle when I see current successes online application is accessible, and then I just try to access that's application for her for employment, but I'm going trying to access policies and it comes back now on my iPad that doesn't support Safari. So I'm sitting there going, there are many people out there that use Apple products and I can't even get into the board policies because it doesn't support Safari. Anyways, this is comment. Yeah. But anyways, but yeah, so I did like it. It was just the comments on what points that I mean, I had a few, but I think it warrants a little bit more. And I agree that we need somebody to act on that committee. For sure. For sure.
I think one of the feedback, obviously, right now would be anything online should support all sort of mobile platforms. Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to add right now? Or we're to carry it forward to next month as well. So if you want to take some time to go over it further. Yeah, so
I don't have anything to add. Is that what you were asking?
yeah, yes. Thank you.
I'm good.
Decide to defer to the rest of it till the next meeting. We'll continue on in the next meeting.
Yeah, just to add the one more next meeting. So one bringing someone in to present, I think would be fabulous. Two, just almost a question to them is like, you know, we gave some feedback into the K-12 standards, and wondering a little bit about, was that considered, was that incorporated? I'm actually not 100% sure. I know the post-secondary one got finalized and then came out. So maybe you guys may be more aware of what happened with it in terms of where it's at in terms of stage.
Well, both of them have, both of them were submitted to the ministry, post-secondary and well, no, it's actually, and then the post-secondary to the minister. Basically, it's now at the point where the government, that there were recommendations for the standard, and it's now to continue to push the ministry, the two ministries, Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, they actually write the standard. And so, I mean, the election happened, it's election, so now as groups are starting to organize to actually start advocating, saying, okay, now you're in place, in power, and you've got, now let's see the standard. So it's back to that application, advocating for the standard to be written. It is a bit frustrating, but I know that there has been several groups that have made and written letters, and that might be, again, something that we might want to consider as saying, okay, these standards have been written, you're now back into the government. What are you planning to do to ensure both Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility and Ministry of Education to actually get standards written? Because we need it. I mean, it was evident from all the feedback that was provided from the, I mean, I must say, depending on especially the K-12, on the feedback that we received, we had anywhere between 65 to almost 90, I think it was 92%, depending on the recommendation, people that actually agreed with the recommendations that were being brought forth, which has never been heard of when it comes to consultations like that. So it's well needed and something that maybe might consider writing a letter saying, okay, now you're in charge, let's see you write it.
Just wondering where they landed on that and what they're thinking about it, and
Yeah, I think that more for the minister though, right? They can't
it's not required for school boards to wait on anything before you have to implement it. So kind of staying, and there were a lot, so I'm not expecting the school board will, have on everything. But if you look at the idea of what were some of the weaknesses, yes, we've seen some of the successes, which is fabulous, and definitely want to take the time to celebrate it and enjoy it and continue those, but then to see, where some of those, if there are any weaknesses, what those weaknesses are, and then seeing if there are any recommendations that speak to that, then proactively looking at it and saying, is there something we can do as we're looking at this 20 to 26, right? 2022 to 2026. And I know this is more of a policy document and more of a framework than actual specifics, but just thought I'd throw that question out there.
Okay. Yeah, it's very important. And it should be something that maybe they're out there. You guys have access to the books. It is that you guys take a look at. Sort of be on it when you're thinking about doing so. Back to the letter though to the ministry. Is that something we want to do as a SEAC? We want to start pushing the ministry to see the standards being written, because I know we put a lot of time and energy into reviewing that and putting in our submissions, and it was a long process. It was a long document to go through. There was a lot to comment on, and we spent many hours through several meetings of the subcommittee. So I have to say that when I attended when Minister Lecce was mounting the summer programming for the start the kindergarten start to school for black children, youth, right? The funding about it, which was funding was already presented, but he did that thing, and so I did, and I talked to him significantly about a lot about the K-12, and he actually quoted the number of recommendations, so he was quite well aware of it, which I was surprised, but maybe not because he's probably talked to him. As well, so I was really great, but it is something that I think we should put it back in the forefront of some of the agenda that they're going to be putting together.
So I would say if somebody wanted to make a motion to, you know, sort of throw our input there to regular to ministries asking when we can expect the standards to be written and circulated, we can go ahead and do that.
No, I'm asking for the motion. I just need the motion. Motion to start with the motion. We'll get the right number.
Trying to see that from way down there. I need something closer. We can see her hands up. All in favor? Yeah, excellent. Okay. All right. Next question. Anybody want to? I got one. She's got the other. Okay, wrong. All right. Okay, is there anything else you want to add to today's discussion on the accessibility plan, or should we defer now to next meeting and then move on? Okay. Okay, so then moving on to business arising from the minutes. We have the SEAC survey. The updated version was sort of sent out, which seems to be a lot more concise. You know, sort of what we're looking for. You know, I think sort of narrowing down the information we really want to know is, you know, do you feel like you're being consulted? Are things going well? What's going well? What's not going well? That sort of thing. Does anybody have any comments, further comments on it? After going through. No? Senza? I can't see that. Yeah, okay. Under number 14, there's only a couple of things that I sort of, and honestly, I guess I know these are part of the identification documents, and they've always kind of bugged me because I don't really understand why or what they're supposed to mean. Like one of them is that number 14 is inclusive student services identification for my child receives support for, and it lists a whole bunch. Behavior. I've never really understood what that section's for, because it's kind of used as this sort of lump thing, like a child with anxiety is listed under behavior. Often, too often, more than it should be, or a child with ADHD is listed under behavior. When often for them it's a learning disability more than a behavior issue, for example. And the difficulty I have with it is whether it should be or it shouldn't be, that label of behavior, that term behavior, is often interpreted in the negative. And it's very hard. And I remember going way back to my kids were first identified with ADHD, as to not allow it to be listed under behavior because it's always seen as negative. And I remember having that conversation and having to push that and insist upon the learning disability and actually being told, well, you know, learning disabilities also has, you know, its difficulties to get over. And I'm like, one conversation with my kid and that, you know, sort of that misconception will be gone by the teacher. But the behavior part is harder to get past, because once that is there, the moment a child does anything, as kids do, they're going to be reacting because they think that there's the concept is that there's a behavioral issue with the child. So, you know, I don't know where this sort of goes. It's just I feel like this particular identification is problematic, and I don't know if that's another lobbying thing or not. Because it's always bothered me, because everything's behavior, isn't it? Good and bad, and, so, there's that part, I just wish that children, we weren't using that one. I wish we were using other things as opposed to that. This one should be like, I don't know, should never really be used, as far as I'm concerned. Kids should never be put under that exceptionality, as far as I'm concerned. And then there's the multiple exceptionalities, because here we're saying select all that apply. And then we get to multiple exceptionalities. Well, that's usually ticked off when there's more than one of these other items. So to me, that is almost a bit redundant, because if you have, ADHD and giftedness, or ADHD and a speech impairment, you're labeled that you go under multiple exceptionalities.
Basically, that one.
Yeah.
So when we were meeting with assessment and accountability, that's our data people.
Mhm.
It's challenging, right, when you put parent caregiver survey out, because these are the categories by the ministry definition right now. So it's not an internal board thing. And so when we're going to formal identifications, these are the outlines. Some of the reasons you outline are why we made the statement that we would print them in our special education plan here, that we linked to the ministry site. And so that diagnoses deficit, I believe, mainly around autism and intellectual disability as well, were two of the examples that we framed for the ministry when we said we're not going to replicate the language, but we'll link it respectfully of the fact that this is the framework we have. So I think you've very well addressed the behavior as what we can see and respond to versus internal to the child is kind of how I always try to reframe it, because I agree. The reason for multiple exceptionality when select all above that apply is that when we sit in conversation, and again, remind Anthony, Connor, when we sit in conversation with families, in order to have families be able to respond to what they connect with for their child, we need to list both, because some will say, oh, my child is identified with A and B, and so I'm going to click A and B, and you're just going to know that that's multiple because I clicked 2. But for some of our families, they will say, my child has multiple exceptionalities, and take it on a little bit more as the identification rather than the clustering of 2. They'll identify as that multiple exceptionality as the exceptionality, and then we go right, but then it's these 2 parts. And so it's to really give choice to the family to indicate how they would like that reflected in giving this information. But I do think sometimes we hear, and again, I think it goes back to the point between yourself and Chris that we use a lot of language and we assume that that's going to hold and stick, because even sometimes when we talk about what classes a student is in, we'll go structured learning or practical learning, and a family will go, my kids in the program for kids, it's the autism class. And so allowing and making sure that the documentation is accurate, to be transparent, but that we give choice and voice in the language to define, and really giving that to the family to say, how do you want to talk about your child? I think we need both, and we're going to end up, some people are going to check 3, some people are going to check 4, but we've also talked about some of the accuracy, inaccuracy, but because we talked about whether we would leave multiple exceptionality on or pull it off. And then went to some families are going to be looking for that. One of the flags I had was they're not quite in alpha order yet, and should be, because it looks like a ranking. And so we'll need to correct for that. But I think multiple exceptionalities will keep us out of alpha order, just for if you didn't find you here, maybe it's because this is what you're looking for. But the different combinations are part of the kids' magic of the gifts and talents. But I just, in conversation with families, I think there's the written language that we use, and then there's family descriptive, and we want to make sure that as we hold to that legislative component, we still give, how do you want to talk about your child on level? That makes sense.
And, I was just gonna say, I mean, that is one of the comments around K-12, around the language, that's in the Education Act, but, particularly around the identification, because there are other diagnoses that are even represented in these categories, Ministry of Education memorandum that explains what these are. I mean, we've seen even through SEAC, a variety of associations and groups that have asked for to include that ministry, to change the act to include things like, MSAD and all that stuff. Yes, small anemia and so forth. So we're saying that, why don't you just change the definitions and stuff and the definition that reflect human rights code and so forth. So but yeah, I'm glad you put them in alphanumeric, and I would agree with multiple exceptionalities at the bottom. But yeah, it still irks me when I see it. I don't like some of the categories they group you, but unfortunately that's the act as it is today. And hopefully we get the standard and stuff. They might change some of the legislative requirements.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, for sure.
There's not for the time, just say I agree 100% in terms of that category, and definitely agree that it's great to have some more, but recognizing that, the comments that Andrea and Don said here as well. And so I was just going to say, the point that I wanted to highlight that I felt like to speak to families too is that the multiple exceptionality that needs to have the multiple checks, because I think yes, though you could lump in, they look so different to huge range, and so I like that point that some will identify with that specific label, but others may identify with multiple, and then including the multiple, and then some won't check it off even though there are multiple. So yeah, it's definitely that's right. It'd be interesting to get that data back, but interesting discussions as well, and perhaps I don't know if it's worthwhile. I'm just throwing out an idea here to indicate that you may not identify with all these categories. These are kind of ministry categories. Some sort of statement like that kind of speaks to that. The language is perfect, but we just want to acknowledge that, name it, and then just do you feel, just in case it triggers anybody or opens up lots of complex emotions for people.
Yeah. For sure. Does anybody else? Oh, I see Senator Knapp has a hand up.
I'm not sure if this is what Donna said, but I think that there should be a write-in option under here. Some people only know the diagnosis that their doctor gave them and would not be able to fit it in within the categories that we provided.
Yes, this is why we love you. Yes, that makes so much sense. Yeah,
So we'll go identity or that.
yes, something to that effect. Yes.
Yeah, or something. We'll,
Yeah, because you're right, there are things that will never pop up that.
For sure. For sure, and that kind of goes back to my point of some of the things are lumped under behavior that parents might not see an option, so they might not check it. Because they know the diagnosis and they don't see it as a behavior, right?
yeah, we'll just change the prompt from identification to it.
Yeah, perfect. Does anybody else have any comments on this? I think we're getting close.
Perfect. We'll
Yeah.
polish it and
Polish
circulate
it.
it by email for one last vote.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so there's member at large posting. We
Or
have,
receive, this one indicated is coming in tomorrow.
so 4 received, 5 indicated is coming,
One.
5 total, 1 more, right? Possibly a 6. So hopefully, you know, we will, tomorrow's the deadline, so who knows how many will come in. But, with any luck, we'll get a few more and hopefully have it narrowed, you know, sort of narrowed down for our next, yeah,
Correct.
for recommendation.
For here and then, so member at large, SEAC, subcommittee will bring a recommendation and all names forward to SEAC. SEAC will make recommendation to board and then SEAC's membership is approved by board.
Yeah.
Again, colonial roots, but it is grounded in the Education Act.
Yeah, exactly. Some people may not actually, we should probably address this, some people may not realize, we actually have 2 member at large SEAC positions open. Because sadly, in the process of sort of organizing for the member at large position, we realized there's a residency component to SEAC, a SEAC position. You must live in the region, the Durham, like in, so it's, any member of the SEAC table has to live within Durham region. If you move outside of Durham region, then the residence requirement is a continuum. It's not like it doesn't sort of, you have to be here when you first sit, it continues on. So if you move, you can no longer remain a member of SEAC. So unfortunately, and it's sad because Donna Edgeby brought a wealth of knowledge to this table, given her position with Durham College. But as a legislative requirement, unfortunately, that we can't get around. So that's why we have 2 member at large positions available going forward. So that's where that came from.
And we have strongly suggested that and given her the contact information for the superintendent of special education in the region.
Yes,
relocate.
We have absolutely. So hopefully she will go try and join the SEAC there because she brings a lot to the table, and sadly not our table anymore. Anyway, so does anybody have any questions about that process? Okay, so hopefully by next meeting we'll have the recommendations be brought to you guys and then going to board. So
if anybody wants to join us.
Oh yes,
let us know as well.
Yes.
There's a subcommittee that will meet to bring recommendations to this table. And we had talked about it last month, but if any members want to be part of that conversation, just flag it to that.
Yes, please. Currently it's myself and Tara. And it was and Donna.
No,
yeah. Donna Edgeby, yeah, Donna Edgeby on that. So if anybody else wants to join, we'll be sort of gathering to go over the applications that are submitted and sort of go through and sort of narrow it down. Okay. But feel free, yeah, please just shoot me an email or just tell me now if you're here and you want to go, you want to join it. All right, so moving on then to the association reports and committee reports. There was some that, oh, sorry, the ASL course data. So it was in the admin report, right? That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Sensor and F had sent an email in September, and I'm not sure if we got that circulated. We didn't need to choose, doesn't need to speak to it, just some information from Autism Ontario that she wants circulated for us and for our information. So we'll make sure that gets sent around. Did I see something from Rowan?
Don't believe so, but we'll check.
Okay. I was trying to find it, but we'll check. And if Rowan has sent, and we will circulate that as well.
Eva?
Yeah, sorry.
I would just like to add that the things that I sent are actually very detailed documents. The Autism Ontario's response to the PPM, their survey from families in flux about the COVID and how caregivers of people with autism responded to that, as well as the K-12 committee that deals with transition. There is a wealth of information in there, and I'm hoping that people will get time to review it. And if there's questions, they can bring them back to me and I can bring them back to the head group. They are now having us meet them. Autism Ontario is having all the SEAC people across the new borders meet once a month so we can have more consistency on what's happening on every single SEAC table. So good things are happening over at Autism Ontario. And because my mic is open, I'm just gonna slide into the PIC committee. And we had our meeting last night. We've picked our 4 dates for the year. Lisa, I will send those dates via email so that they can be included in the meeting minutes. And we are getting ready to pick what committee we'd like to participate on. But the biggest thing is there was just under 30 parents in attendance yesterday, and that was a large number for this group and committee.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Thank you for sitting on that group as well, that PIC committee, because it's so nice to have SEAC representation on that committee. So important. And that actually leads me to, sorry, I'm juggling my papers here again. I printed off a copy of email from Smile Canada. Thought I stole it back from you. Too many papers here. They are looking, so I actually spoke to the lady who had, it's Small Canada. They have a group that meets of parents that meet here in Durham. That sort of support families of racialized students. And they were talking about looking at having a SEAC member come out to one of their meetings. Their November meeting's probably booked by now. I didn't want to just, when we got the email, and say, oh yeah, I'll come and speak. I felt like it should go to the committee in case somebody wanted to take that on to go and speak at some point regarding sort of advocacy in the schools and helping parents, discussing how parents can best advocate for their kids in the schools. So I wanted to bring that to the table, and we can, sort of get further information. But she's going to let me know when they have an opening available. But I just thought it was something that maybe, that we wanted to put out there for if somebody else was available to go and do that, because I think it's important for us all to get to sort of get an opportunity to get out there and share not only about SEAC and stuff, but also like I'm feeling like when you're talking about families of racialized students, it might be something that would be better to have the representative, for example, the Black Parents Association, to go and talk, because you probably have more experience of advocating for your child, and you have barriers. Everybody has different barriers, right? And you're looking at that sort of intersectionalities.
Maybe a couple members are on too.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially about SEAC.
For sure, yeah.
And we're happy as staff to support in any preparation as well.
Okay, that would be
for
good.
any members,
we're going to go.
Yeah, fully
So,
committed to supporting that.
yeah, so I have left my, I gave Lisa my email address as well as my cell phone number and stuff. So she wanted to contact me with whatever. She was going to reach back out to the Durham group and see what their needs are, or when they have lots available, and then let me know. Okay, so yeah, with maybe some dates and stuff like that. So I just wanted, yeah, yeah, perfect. Okay, yeah, I thought we should bring that here. So okay, we didn't have any correspondence this month. It's not right. Sorry?
Oh, the WNC.
Association report, right? Yeah.
I think it's just that, yeah, so starting to meet and haven't been prolific.
Haven't been prolific.
Writers, authors yet.
We're working on that.
We're working on it.
Yeah, we'll get the ball rolling. Okay, so moving on then to community concerns.
Can I just ask about the letters today? All those months?
Yeah. Yeah. That way we get an advocacy ball rolling.
Inspire others.
Yeah. We've been inspired in the past too. So. Okay.
Anybody have any community concerns they want to bring forward? Had some of that, let's see.
It's actually a success story. Last month, I brought to you my concern about the IPRC appeal and how the parent navigates that. And I'm happy to report that we now have our committee for our appeal committee, and we have our first date set that we will get together. So it's moving forward.
That's great to hear. And awesome that you were able to step up and help the family with that, because that's huge, especially at a time when they're so stressed.
Yes.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any community concerns or community successes? Okay, then we're moving on to celebrations and successes, which we've got Sensa. Do you have any other Sensa? Yeah. Anybody else? Sorry?
Was that celebrations and successes?
Yes.
Oh, I have something that I'm privately doing. I have a milestone birthday coming up. I plan to be on the motherland for my birthday, but in true inclusive form, I found the only autism center in Ghana, and I have contacted them, and I have a full suitcase of sensory toys, timers, a laminating machine with laminating paper, with Velcro, with crayons and markers and all kinds of things that I'm ready to donate to them, as well as I'm going to give them a day of my a whole full day of my time, just volunteering. So hopefully we will find out what their needs are. So look out for in the future. I may be coming back looking for training opportunities for them.
That's amazing. Awesome. I can't even tell you how awesome that is. In my mind, that's so great. Yeah.
I'll just do kudos out to Easter Seals as a family member for accessing their equipment pool and also muscular dystrophy. We have been as a family looking to try to put a home lift into our home because we were not able to find a one level home that could work. And so they it's a big financial cost. And we're just within that income where we can't access most of the financial funds or the government funds, but we're not rich, or we're rich in many ways, but don't have that kind of money just floating around to be able to pay for it. So really great for them. And just this week, I've got some great news that they're going to be supporting us financially. So big kudos to Easter Seals and muscular dystrophy, just for supporting families where there's not any government funding, but lots of supports that we have to pay out of pocket for. And really, they say that raising a child with disability and other disabilities as well, of course, can cost 3 to 5 times what it might cost to raise the a child without those needs. So just wanted to kudos to them and a little bit of our gratitude.
Anybody else? I think we're good. Okay. Our next SEAC meeting is November 10th, 2022. A little earlier in the month. Right here in person in the boardroom. And we'll see you all then. And we just need a motion to adjourn. Anybody want a motion to adjourn? Donna, seconders? And all in favor? Okay. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming up. Thank you for joining.
Thank you guys for accommodating me today. I'll see you in person next month.
For sure.